Hey, I wanted to give a trigger warning that in this episode, we do discuss suicide and suicide attempts. If this is something that is difficult for you, please pass on this episode and we'll see you next time.
I mean, I feel like going through everything, I realized that grief isn't just, someone died, I miss them. It's, I missed out on my childhood. I'm grieving my childhood.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of The Day After. On today's episode, we sit down with Phil, who opens up about losing his dad when he was just 13 years old to suicide. Phil even opens up and shares about his multiple suicide attempts in his life and how losing his dad impacted him and how it impacts him today. We're grateful to Phil for sharing and opening up with us. Before we let you go, make sure you rate and review, as it goes a long way to helping this show grow and to supporting the guests who come on and share their stories. So go ahead, grab your warm water, and sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Yeah, so it was actually the day before my 13th birthday. Normal day at school, normal day at everything. Came home, got off the bus, noticed my uncle was in the driveway, which was kind of weird. And walked in the house, and they sat me down and told me that my dad went to work and he was shot and he wasn't coming home. And then, after a little bit, I asked who did it, and they said it was him.
Wow.
So obviously, your whole world kind of turns upside down. You're trying to figure out, what happened, what did you miss, anything like that. The big question of why, the big question of how. How could this happen? And then I didn't even think of it until months after. It's like, okay, my birthday is tomorrow. Is this a personal thing?
Holy shit.
Did he not like me? Anything like that. Your mind starts wandering and trying to figure it out, put all the pieces together. But, come to find out, it wasn't, thankfully. But yeah, that was pretty much it. I mean, from there, everything kind of spiraled down. Come to find out, my parents didn't have the best relationship. My mom was kind of estranged with his family. They didn't like her. She didn't like them. And she wasn't, she still isn't, obviously, right. She is mentally ill. She's dealing with manic depression, all sorts of issues. She's been medicated, all that. So that kind of fed into everything else also. And we had to, work through all that. So not only did the actual death lead to, okay, going through this incident, I'm also dealing with mourning my childhood. From the day it happened, I had to start paying the bills. I had to start, fixing stuff around the house, working on the cars, paying bills. I mean, I was 13 years old. I was paying bills, going to the all this stuff. She had all sorts of medical issues, so she couldn't do anything. So I had to take care of all of it. So I ended up, not only losing my father, losing his entire side of the family, but I also lost my entire childhood in the meantime.
Yeah.
Do you have siblings?
No, thankfully I'm an only child. So I was the only one that had to deal with this. It's a good thing, and, it's a not so good thing. I was the only one, shouldering all of this, but thankfully I was the only one that had to go through all of that.
Yeah.
So you came home 13 years old. The next day was your birthday. That's when you found out. And you, at 13 years old, had the ability to ask who did it and why?
Yeah. Because my father he was an intelligent man. He was very straight-faced. He never showed any sort of, internal strife, pain, anything like that. No sadness. He never showed any of that. So it was just so mind-boggling to think that he was dealing with something like that. And it took years, decades, to really start unraveling all of the pieces. It was a lot to try and figure out, and it took a lot of time. And it took, so many exercises, different therapists to work through. Okay, it's not my fault. It's not my mother's fault. It's not anything.
Yeah.
There was even a point where I thought to myself, okay, he was such an intelligent man. He was such a strong man. If he didn't think that he could get through it, I almost believed that there was no other option.
Yeah.
And it's such a wild thought to think, maybe this was the right choice. Maybe he couldn't, get through it. But unfortunately, it was back in 2006. Mental health was not, it was not a big thing. It wasn't accepted, especially being first generation Italian. He was off the boat, so nobody spoke of that kind of stuff. Nobody spoke of divorce. All these things that probably could have saved his life it wasn't an option. So that was a very tough thing to work through and to comprehend and understand. And just the thought of, you're sitting at home and you're like, all right, maybe he did do the right thing if he wasn't able to work through it on his own. Were there any other options? Come to find out, he was planning it for years. When they went through his briefcase when they found him, and it was like a news clipping from 2 or 3 years prior of how to like work through losing, a loved one or the provider of the family.
No way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was insane. And you didn't see anything. Nobody knew. There were family, friends, neighbors. Took us all completely by surprise. Down to, this is just how like analytical and, no real emotion. He left. It was a 1-page letter, more emotional. These are my shortcomings. These are where I'm failing. It was during the stock market, started to tumble around that time. And he was a subcontractor for GM who was going through problems. So the work was starting to dwindle, looking for jobs, all that stuff. No one would hire him because he's been in the industry for years. He only had, I think, an associate's or a bachelor's. They wanted more. And he wasn't, his words were, I'm not enough. I'm not enough for these people, even though I've been doing this for so long. So it was a 1-page, this is how I feel. This is where I messed up, as a husband, as a father, all that. But then it was like a 5-page how-to of how to move past this. So
no way.
I have these investments. I have these stocks. Do this. I did the math. The house will be paid off in X years. Stay here. All this stuff. Even down to, at the end of the season, put fuel stabilizer in the lawnmower.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Make sure all these little things are taken care of. And it's like, how does someone do this?
Yeah.
I've been to the brink. I've actually attempted suicide twice. And thankfully I'm terrible at it because I'm still here. But I could never imagine planning shit out like that. It was the most mind-boggling thing. And I remember I asked my mom, I'm like, did he leave any notes for me? And it was literally just a little handwritten, like, sticky note, like, make sure you take your vitamin before school. I'm like, thanks, Dad. Got it. So I got this, It was absolute madness.
I was going to ask if maybe he actually was leaving that like very detailed note for you, just knowing that you would be the one that kind of picked up and
right.
You know what I mean?
I honestly never thought of that because I was so disgusted by it. That you went to these lengths to take care of everything, but then at the end of the day, you're leaving all these burdens on me. I was 12 years old, I wasn't even 13 yet, and you're doing this. It was just wild. And then I spent from, the time I was 13 till present day trying to figure everything out. Like, I had to learn how to shave the hard way. It's like, all right, I almost cut my throat. Like, this is great.
Yeah.
So at 13 years old, you're just developing, like, I would say deeper friendships, going through puberty, like going on your path to manhood at that point, right? Like societally, that's when everything starts to change. How did that affect your relationships to your friends?
So I remember when he passed, I took, I think, a week off. It was right in the middle of the school year. So it was in September. So he passed on September 8th. So you're talking 3-4 days into the school year, my first week of high school. So I come back to school, and your body, especially when you're that young, you can't comprehend what's going on. The whole week we're trying to plan everything, and my mom is arguing with his family, where's he going to be buried? who's paying for what are we going to do? So it's this back and forth battle. And being that young, it's just a brick wall. You have no idea what's going on. You're just in a daze. Nothing seems real. So I go back to school and I'm like, what's up, guys? And they're like, you good? I'm like, yeah, what's up? Like, let's go. And nobody even believed that it happened because, a switch flipped in my head. Like, I have to be a different person now. Like, yes, that happened. Yes, I was a kid yesterday. I'm not anymore. Those shoes have to be filled, especially with how my mother was. She couldn't do anything. She was psychotic.
You knew to take that role on immediately.
Oh yeah, I had to. There was no one else to do it. Even I'm trying to think of, stuff right off the bat. Like we stayed in the house for maybe 3 months, and then when we were moving, it was during like an ice storm, of course. Like, why not just pile the shit on, right? So I'm moving out of my childhood house. We're packing everything up. She slips and falls on ice and tears her rotator cuff. So she's in a sling and I'm unpacking the truck. Like, where does this box go? Where does this box go? And until the time I moved out, there were some fucking boxes still labeled. She found this like color-coded dot thing. And it's like, okay, the red dot goes up in the attic and this and that. I'm like, whatever. We're just getting it in the house. It's a fucking storm. You're a piece of work. Like, and until the day I moved out, some of that shit never moved.
Oh my God.
What age did you move out of your house from your mom?
I was in college. I was in trade school. So probably like 2012.
Okay.
So 2006 to 2012, I was still living with my mom. And it eventually got to the point where, thankfully, the level of maturity, I was able to realize, like, this bitch is crazy. Like, I gotta go. And that was when I started to realize, like, she is not well. She can't, I had to draw the line of, I can't deal with her, at all. I can't live a normal life around her. She was so controlling, manipulative, gaslighting. It was a whole mess. But I eventually had to walk away. I moved out, and thankfully, Sarah's parents took me in kind of as like a, stray dog, a little orphan or something. And so, Nicole too. We were just stray dogs, and they were just taking everybody in. They were like Lollipop Farm over there. It was great.
I want to talk more about like what the experience of losing your dad. Essentially, your mom is mentally, emotionally checked out and gone and dealing with her own shit. And now you become an adult and doing adult things that even a lot of adults don't do to this day. How does that relationship with your friends, and then from 13 to early 20s, do you struggle to relate to people? Do you how do you cope with all of this pressure and then trying to be a kid and a young adult with your friends?
I mean, when I was young, it wasn't as bad. I think once I started getting older and I started realizing, like, hey, my priorities are a lot different from those around me, being that much more emotionally jaded, I guess. I feel like once you've been through shit, the way I look at it, it's anytime you experience anything huge like that, I feel like you're on a different level than other people. Not saying it's a good level or a bad level. You're just somewhere else.
A different wavelength.
Right, exactly. So all these kids were going to school and doing all this fun stuff. And hey, my parents are throwing a party. And it's like, no, I got to mow lawn. I gotta go to work. I got to pay bills. And it's like, dude, you're 15. Like, what are you doing? It's like, someone's got to do it. She's not working. She's on Social Security. She's pissing money away left and right on dumb stuff,
Yeah.
And I almost became not only my father, but also like her husband in a very weird, way where, she almost blurred that line where, you're not my son, you're almost my counterpart.
Mm-hmm.
And it was tough, man. It sucked. So anything happens. Like, I remember one time, like, we got a bad tax return and she looked at me, she goes, what are you going to do? I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like 17. You got to figure this shit out, man. I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to college.
Right.
So I didn't have, the opportunity that others had. I didn't have the time to focus on, school. I didn't have time to focus on friendships. I had to go home. I had to get stuff done. I would get a call in the middle of school. Hey, the AC kicked out. Like, you got to come figure this out, or my car broke down. You got to figure this out. The dog chewed a hole in the door, and it's like, okay, cool. Like, I'll be home in a couple hours. I guess I'll take care of it.
How did you cope in all of this?
I really didn't. Through 2 decades of therapy and tens of thousands of dollars, shout out Val, you're the best. I realized I never really handled it. I shut that door, I packed it away and I did what I had to do. And, now that I'm 30, I'm established. I have a wife, I have a kid on the way. I have a house, I have a job, I have all this stuff. I'm in a position where I can kind of coast and see, where I might have fucked up in the past and what am I going to do about it? And I'm trying to figure out my life now before my kid comes, because the second she's born, that's my focus. That's my number one. So I'm taking this time now to really dig in. And that's when I'm realizing that I never coped with it. I didn't have time. I didn't have the emotional ability to, I didn't know how to. So, I feel like going through everything, I realized that grief isn't just, someone died, I miss them. It's, I missed out on my childhood. I'm grieving my childhood. Even people that jump into relationships or, they're on Tinder or whatever, you can grieve that single life, or you can grieve that life that you had with other people. It's not just a death.
Right.
I have had to take the time to grieve my childhood. I've had to grieve the time where I was at school. People say it sucks, but at the end of the day, it's not that bad. It's a cakewalk. You just got to learn math and shit. Bills and fixing stuff around the house, that's a hell of a lot harder than algebra.
100%. What's that grieving look like for you? How does that manifest in your life?
A lot of times, honestly, it's just like immature behavior. Sarah and I both go to therapy together. So, our therapist is kind of the mediator, and, she knows everything I've been through. So Sarah will bitch about something I do, oh, he's not open to this, or he said this. And she's like, but honey, you got to look at what he didn't have. This is his inner, 15-year-old that never had a chance to exist coming out, going out to the bar, getting blackout drunk at 2 a.m. He never had the opportunity to be a kid, to be a young adult. He went from 13 to 30 in the matter of a day. So he's just trying to experience that. And I think it's been a learning experience for both of us. I try to obviously keep it to a minimum.
Yeah.
But it's good for her to know, like, hey, why is he being an asshole? Why is he being stupid? It's not a choice. It's something, just coming out as it goes. It's a wild ride. I think most of it is just knowing, that that's a normal thing. It's a normal process. And it's wild how the human mind works in that way. It really is.
It tries to protect us.
Yeah. You can only handle so much.
Yeah.
And it knows that. It knows your limits. You don't know it, but it does.
Yeah, without a doubt.
We've talked a little bit about kind of that growing up very quickly. And it's kind of something that I felt it, certainly not to an extent that you did, Phil, but definitely like, I think we talked about it in the episode with my dad, but it was like, if my dad could have given me keys to the car, he could have, he would have, could have. I was only 9 when she died, so I definitely should not have been driving a car. But I definitely tried to like step up in terms of like being the mom, being something, trying to just help. And that's like manifested later in life because that's who I am. Like, I literally just have to help with everything.
Right.
And even I'll get told at my job, like, that's not your job. You shouldn't be doing that. I'm like, I know, but like, I have like this incessant need to like help people or get the job done.
It becomes who you are. Yeah. And you can't change that.
No. And it's like, now, despite maybe a million bosses telling me that I should probably say no to some things, I just embrace it. I'm like, that's who I am. Like, if I have to work late because I'm helping out a colleague, I don't care. And obviously in your case, you were doing so many things that were way beyond what a 13-year-old and not, I shouldn't even say what they should have to do, right? But what they are doing, what is like air quotes normal. And like you said, it probably made it really hard to relate to your classmates. Like,
Yeah.
no, I can't come over after school for, I don't know, Pokemon trading, whatnot, right? Like I've got to go to school. And I don't, CJ, I feel like Grace has probably had a bit of that. I mean, she was a little bit older than me, but I think there's like a natural element that like the oldest kid just kind of feels like you've got to step up to help. You know, like that's what my parent would have wanted, regardless of how they left us. But I can't really imagine having to go through this process of like, why did he leave? You know, for me and for CJ and all that, you know, like we had a reason, you know, we knew it was cancer that took them. And that's a little bit, it's easier. It's easier to digest.
Because there's a boogeyman, right? It's easier to be like, all right, well, fuck you, cancer. But there is that interesting thing with that older child, and Grace did do that. And I remember the first day where the kids always sat in the back seat. And the next day she was in the front seat. And I was like, what the fuck? This is really weird. And it kind of tripped me up. And I remember like instinctively being like, okay, I need to make sure that they know and that she knows that like they're still the children.
Right.
And that I have my own support system and that they need to have a support system. But yeah, it is that weird thing to do that. And I want to talk about, if you're okay with it, Phil, of you mentioned you had a couple of attempts at taking your own life. When were those attempts in terms of the timeline of your life? And what was the events surrounding that?
So the first time, oh God, I can't remember what year it was. So it was 7th grade.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was always the fat kid growing up, right? We'll just break the ice with that. I was always the heifer in the classroom. Like,
you're super skinny right now, though.
No. You know, I was it. I was maybe like top 2 in the school, right? And I was never the popular kid either. So you're like way down on the ladder. The kids like on the school bus, at school, all that were like the meanest bullies ever. They were just ferocious. And one day I had enough and, you know, went in the kitchen and started downing pills. And my mom caught me, all that, you know, rushed to the hospital, yada, yada, yada. And, you know, I had to get my stomach pumped, all that. I'm like, man, if I was like 15 minutes sooner, man, I would have had it. So the first time it was just bullies. I mean, it was like 2nd grade on. So I held out for a while.
Yeah. So 7th grade, I mean, that's pretty much right after your dad passed.
No, it was right before.
Oh, it was before.
Yeah, it was before. So I thought at that point, my mom and I were the crazy two, right? She was on antidepressants. She's going to therapist. And then I try to off myself. And I thought my dad was the only one. Right. I'm like, oh, he's the rock. Fuck. He's good. We got everybody.
Right.
And then come to find out, you know, he's the one that actually can pull it off. So that was just insane to me. You know, I thought it was going to be one of us.
Yeah.
Right.
And then he comes out of left field like, yo, got you.
Did your mind flash back to them? I mean, that's 7th grade. You're 13 in 7th grade.
I was 13 when he passed. So that was 9. So I was like 11.
Oh,
yeah. I was a youngin'.
Did your mind flash back to that moment when you found out about your dad?
I don't think so. No, honestly. I was just so flabbergasted that he would have been the one.
Yeah.
You know, if I was going to think of anybody doing that, it would 100% have been like my mom number 1, me number 2, or vice versa. It depends on the day. You know, I always thought he would have been the one, you know, just kind of coasting through, being totally fine. So that was the first time. The second time was actually the bad tax day. So we got out of the tax place and, you know, we owed stupid money. I don't know how. My mom fucked something up royally. And we owed like 8-10 grand.
Oh, fuck.
And it's like, we don't have that. Like, there was a time. So when my dad was alive, we were okay. We were never wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
He was always good with money. He made okay money. He was, you know, very pinch penny. down to the point, like, we would go to the store and I'd want like this spiral mac and cheese. This is like a core memory, right? I swear to God, I tell everybody this. Always wanted the spiral mac and cheese. I couldn't have it because it was 10 cents more than the other one. So of course, after he passed, I'm like, spiral mac and cheese, let's go. This is my time. My time to shine.
Yeah. Spiral is elite.
Oh, for sure. And of course, now I realize, like, maybe it's not that great.
Save the 10 cents.
Yeah, but he was just that type of person. He never spent unnecessary money. So we were always okay. Then my mom just, well, he's gone. Everybody's sad. Let's spend money, try to make everybody whole again. So she blew through everything, disobeyed everything he planned out, and I remember there were days we would be, going through the couch cushions, trying to find change to go to Taco Bell and get something to eat.
Damn.
So going from, the core nuclear family where you're totally okay to that is stressful enough. And then, you go and get your taxes done and it's like, hey, guess what? You owe $6,000 or whatever it was. And then she looks at me, she's like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'm fucking out. Like, see ya. Like, as soon as we get home, I'm done. I forgot exactly what happened. There was like a park across the street and I went out there and I tried to OD again. And of course, 0-2, man. Not that great at it. Came wandering home all loopy and shit. Back we go to the hospital, back to get our, it's good times.
Yeah, so this was high school then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had you met Sarah at this point?
No. It's funny because I had a crush on her then. I mean, I had a crush on her in middle school. So like I knew her. Like, okay, I'm watching you, you look nice today. You smell good. She had no idea who the fuck I was. No clue. She's like, oh, that fat, annoying kid. Like, yeah, over there, whatever. And I'm over here with my friends like, yeah, I'm going to marry her someday. She just doesn't know it yet. Here we are.
I said that about my wife in high school.
It's so funny because everybody's like, no, she's not even going to talk to you. You wait long enough.
I know you guys both have that in common. You were high school sweethearts.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was a one-sided high school sweetheart. It was one-sided.
When did you start dating her then?
It was after college. So it was like a super freak incident. Or after high school, I'm sorry. It was right before I went into trade school. So it was like 2011, 2012. We started talking, but she was I went on vacation with a buddy of mine. His dad, I guess, felt bad for me, saw my whole existence. And he's like, hey, we're going on vacation. We're going down to Florida. Come with us. I'll cover everything. One of the nicest gestures I've ever had, right? So he flies all of us down. We go to Orlando. We're at Universal. And I took a picture of the hotel and I posted it on Facebook. And Sarah commented, she's like, oh my God, I'm here too. Like, this is my last night. We should hang out and say hi.
What?
I'm like, oh, fuck yeah. Like, let's go. So my buddy gets me a bunch of drinks. I'm super drunk. We're talking, all that stuff. And I'm like, you know what? This is okay. This is going to be okay. And, she was in a long-term relationship, same guy from high school. And it just started to go south. And I was right there.
Damn. That's amazing.
So it was meant to be. It was awesome.
That's beautiful. So what was the state of your mental health, your grieving, the processing? What was your state at that time when you guys started dating?
So I was honestly okay. At that point.
What does okay mean for you?
I would consider it like a normal, like a baseline, nothing crazy is going on. By that point, I kind of settled into my role. Like, hey, the car breaks, you fix it. The house breaks, whatever, you fix it.
Mm-hmm.
I was already working, probably 2 jobs at that point, already graduated high school. So started focusing on college. I was just going to MCC, trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. So it was a nice, breath of fresh air. I was on the highest high at that point. I think that was what kind of set my mom off. She saw this new girl coming in and taking, her son away. But in the same sense, she almost saw like her partner going away. I would spend more time with her as opposed to my mom. I would stay the night at her house. I was always talking about her parents, how nice they are, all this stuff. And that was when she started, I think, to really spiral and get super controlling, super manipulative. It was to the point where, we would go on vacation. I remember one time we were up at the Thousand Islands and just having a great time. And she just bought me like a new bed, right? And we were out on the dock, no cell reception, just having a good time drinking, listening to music. And a text comes through from my mom, like, if you're not home in an hour, you're out of the house. I'm going to put a hammer through your car windshield, all this stuff.
Holy fuck.
And it's like, first of all, I literally can't come home.
Right,
I'm up here with other people. Second of all, unless I have, a plane, I'm not going to make it in an hour. It's a 3-hour drive. So she would pull all these little strings to try and keep me in her little bubble. She would turn off my cell phone service. She would cancel my car insurance and be like, hey, guess what? You don't have car insurance. Like, you got to do this. Like, you're being mean to me. You're not spending time with me. So that led me to, still at that point, a lot of people are, under their parents' cell phone, under their parents' car insurance. And I'm like, yo, fuck this. Like, I'll get my own cell phone. I'll get my own car insurance. Like, you can't control me.
Yeah.
Like, if nothing to this point has, beat me down to the point where I'm not here anymore or I'm checked out, you're not going to be that breaking point.
Yeah.
So that was when I realized, like, I have to cut ties with her completely. So moving forward, Sarah and I started dating, we were getting more serious, talking about marriage, all this stuff. She wasn't involved in anything. I told her, like, you're not coming to the wedding. You're not invited. You're not allowed. If you show up, you will be removed, blocked on social media, blocked from my phone, my email, everything. Like, you're out. To this day, I still have no idea if she even knows that we're having a kid.
Wow.
But even then, the reason for that, the reason I haven't reached out, I forgot the context, but she literally told me, me just trying to live my life. She saw that as me being mean to her or being manipulative to her. And she was like, with how you are, I don't want to see like your seed, your children walk the face of the earth.
What?
And that stuck with me. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, you don't have to, because you're gone. You're done. So from that point on, I was like, okay, cool. I lost my dad. I lost my mom.
Yeah.
And it's like, both of these situations are their choice. My dad decided to end his life and my mom decided to basically end our relationship. So when people, start talking about like my parents, I'm like, oh, I'm an orphan. Like, I don't have anybody. And they're like, well, she's still alive, all that. I'm like, but she's not.
Yeah.
The human that was my mother is no longer. It is this sick, twisted, manipulative, conniving individual that my mother became is still here.
Yeah. You lost her the same day you lost her dad.
Yeah, to an extent.
You had to grieve the loss of, or it seems like you might have had to grieve the loss of like what your mom could have been or should have been for you,
Oh yeah. And I there are still times, it's very few and far between, because she's always been a Looney Tune, from the time I was, cognizant of what was going on to present day. Usually those thoughts are, man, I wish my dad was here to see this. I wish he was here to, see his grandchild come into the world, to see all these people that he loved and cared about succeed. When I think of my mom, she was never really there. It was always the disease. It was always the depression. And it took a lot to really separate the two. Yeah, I have wonderful memories of my mother, but it's such a small handful. A lot of times it was just, remembering her being an absolute psychopath. But yeah, I mean, I did mourn her. It took a lot longer to really look back and, when you only have like 5 or 6 core memories to look through to find like, wow, that was a great experience I had with her.
Yeah.
It takes a little more time to rifle through all the bullshit to find those nice memories. As opposed to my dad. My dad was, he was a fantastic human being. Yeah, he was stern. Yeah, he was cheap, but oh my God, there were good times. Everybody I run across, like I ran into our neighbors from down the street from years ago because the creature of habit, I bought a house like 500 feet from where I grew up. And, I'm getting takeout at a restaurant and they're like, oh my God, how are you? And I'm telling them all this stuff. And, everybody always says like, oh my God, I miss your dad. He was such a wonderful human being. So usually I always lean towards remembering him and all that. But
yeah. Were you able to rekindle the relationship with his side of the family?
Yep. So thankfully that happened. It wasn't too long after. It was probably, I want to say I was completely alienated from them for almost 10 years, 8 or 10 years.
Wow.
It pretty much, we started putting everything back together, maybe 2012. It was after my dad's mother passed away. She actually had heart surgery in Rochester. So we were still estranged. I, went up to the hospital, super, super awkward, got to see her one last time. But after that, my grandfather's best friend, basically my second grandfather, he kind of stepped in when all this was happening. He kind of pushed the two sides together to get us back together. So yeah, we're back together. We're talking. It's awesome. I really needed that. I really needed them. And I think we all realized, my mom spun such a web of lies and manipulation. Like, hey, they don't like me, so you shouldn't like them. But at the same time, it's like, I want you to go see them, but like they don't like me. So as a 13-year-old kid, all this turmoil, you have your loyalties to your mother. And you're telling these people, okay, fuck you. Like, you're being dicks. Like, I don't want to see you. So it took a long time to realize, like, ooh, made a big oopsie on this one. Maybe they were right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could never be expected to like understand that,
right?
And I mean, I'm like grateful that you were able to rekindle that relationship. I think a lot of people, like when they find out that like my mom's family is like I wouldn't even say there's like a difference. I'm just like, yeah, of course I'm so close with my grandma and my aunts and uncles.
Right.
And, they were like, they continue to be like our rock. Like without them, we wouldn't have been able to get through it,
Yeah.
And they're the ones that help us keep that memory alive, like just seeing that family while you're getting takeout and hearing that story, that his family is probably able to tell you that many that story and more.
Oh yeah. I mean, even just hearing, stories of my dad growing up, and
yeah,
some of his friends from high school and college, there was one of his friends lives down in Florida, and he was always a part of my dad's life. And I remember one day I came home, I forgot where I was living, but I got this huge package from him and I recognized the name and I recognized the handwriting, because I'll never forget, at my dad's funeral, we knew Marshall was flying up from Florida. We knew he didn't have, a ton of money to make it up here. He was in a rush. He did everything he could to make it because my dad was one of his good friends. And to this day, I always think about it in the registry of all the people that came in. Marshall's signature was the very last one. We held the calling hours and all that open for like an extra 2 hours because we knew he was coming.
Holy shit.
But he sent me this huge box of like all these letters that him and my dad sent back and forth, from like their college times, and, talking about all the drugs they did and all the girls they were seeing. I'm like, this is fucking gold. It's so funny, because you never think of your parents as, these young kids, fucking around doing stupid stuff. You just see them, as they were when you were a kid. So it was the most eye-opening thing ever. Like, reading about how my dad was high as balls working at the grocery store, all this. It was like, oh my God, he was a human being. That transformed, for me, that was what transformed him from, the statue of a father, stern, almost no emotion, to he was a kid too. He had that experience, and it was very interesting to see it. It was awesome.
Is there any ways that you have or rituals that you have to connect with your dad?
probably the biggest thing. When I was a kid, I was always going to soccer practice. And I remember this day, I mean, as clear as it was yesterday. You know, we were getting ready to get in the truck for the first soccer game of the year, the first ever soccer game. And he said, hey, go in the basement. There's like a black crate of cassettes, you know, because I'm old. You know, go pick one, you know, and we'll listen to it on the way down. And it was the Allman Brothers Fillmore East recording. And that tape stayed in his truck from that day until the day he died. It was in there the whole time. That's all we ever listened to, ever. I don't know how we didn't wear it out. I have no idea. But to this day, anytime I hear the Allman Brothers, like, I love them to death, but it brings me back to that time. And it's like, hey, dude, you're still here. You know, and people, you know, they'll ask me about it and they're like, why are you listening to this? Like, I'm an ex-emo kid, right? So I still listen to like my metalcore, you know, all that shit. But then it's like the pendulum swings and it's like I'm listening to like rockabilly, you know, it's like, what the fuck happened? Like, did you fall and hit your head?
That's why you and Nicole are friends, because you guys had your emo phases together.
Oh yeah. Oh, we were the two emo kids. Yeah.
Yeah. You said ex-emo, but like once you're emo, you're always emo. Like,
oh, you never go back. No, I'm like the senior citizen. Yeah. It's never out. Like,
my wife and I song, our wedding song was Hands Down by Dashboard. So,
hell yeah.
And like Dashboard was very significant. We would just listen to it over and over and over in my car in high school. And whenever I listen to it, it's guaranteed tears.
Oh, yeah.
So like there'll be days where I'm just like, I just have to drive around and just fucking blast him.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you know, same thing. Like if I'm having a rough day and I just got to chill out, like, Allman Brothers Fillmore East. It's my shit. I remember seeing the album when I was a kid. I always called them big CDs because I was not cultured as a 6-year-old. But I was always like, Dad, why do you have big CDs? You know? And he's like, oh man, sit down. Let me tell you a story. But you know, as a kid, I just remember, you know, all the guys in the band sitting on all the cases, you know, the roadie cases, and I didn't know what it was until, you know, years later. But I remember it was actually Nicole. She was talking to a photographer she was working with. And I don't know how it came up, but she told this photographer the story of how my dad and I listened to the Allman Brothers all the time. And he actually gave her his copy of Fillmore East to give to me because I lost my dad's copy. So I mean, it's a once a week, like I'll throw the record on and just listen to it cover to cover. But
that's awesome.
Oh yeah.
As you got married, or maybe now that you're expecting, has it brought up different feelings? Has it, you know, what's the thought process that you're going through as you like approach the due date?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously like Sarah lost her father too. I lost mine in 2006. She lost hers in 2007. So that was almost something we bonded over, you know, as you know, when we first started dating, it was like, we just throw random like dead dad jokes around. I don't know how you guys feel about dead parent jokes, but they're a huge hit with us.
All over the place, bro. Like,
yeah.
Oh man. I think our go-to is always like, oh yeah, like, what do you think we call Father's Day in our house? And it's just like Sunday. and people always like look at us like, you guys are sick fucks. And it's like, you have to, like, we earn these stripes. Like, we're gonna wear them proud. Yeah.
At at the funeral, and that I didn't mean to interrupt, but I have to tell you this. At the funeral, or the wake, the wake, my wife, I remember this woman came up bawling her eyes out. I can't believe Ariana's gone. I was just like, you know what? It's probably for the better, because she was driving me insane. And like the look on her face, she was just like, what? She like could not comprehend. And I'm just like, whatever. Like, it's the only way to get through it. I'm like, first of all, I don't want to fucking be up here. It's the middle of COVID. I don't want to see everybody. Like, this sucks. So you have to use humor, but you're right. Like, you earn those stripes to be able to joke about that shit.
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to say that.
Yeah.
I earned the stripes. Some people are like, you're going to make other people uncomfortable. I'm like, well, they make me uncomfortable, so fuck them.
Yeah.
Like,
it's better when it's awkward. I like that. I think it's better when people like have the most awkward reaction. That's what I think is hilarious.
Oh my God. everybody at work fucking hates me for it. Like they'll be talking about like, oh yeah, like I went fishing with my dad or I did this, and I'll just be sitting at the table like eating my lunch like, yeah, must be nice.
So going back to like you're expecting.
Wait, you didn't finish the question.
No. I was gonna say I was literally gonna try and reel it back in because we.
Okay.
I want to know what he's feeling as he approaches.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. Yeah.
No. So going back to, like the wedding, you know, it was so tough because that was like the first huge event, right? I graduated high school. So what? I went to MCC, went to trade school. So what? You know, that's not a huge thing to me. Like the wedding, seeing, you know, my grandfather, my aunt, my uncle, my cousins, everybody's there. You know, I had my godparents stand in for my parents at the wedding. So I did my first dance with my godmother. You know, my godfather was there. My godfather was my dad's best friend growing up. My godmother was my mom's best friend. They got together, set my parents up. So they've been a huge part of my life. So they were there, and I'll never forget standing up at up at the front, waiting for Sarah to come down. And I looked down, and I can't remember if it was my mother-in-law or my godmother, but she pointed to the empty chair and mouthed, "This is for your dad." And I just started fucking bawling. And it's like, this is the moment I wanted him to be here for.
Yeah.
You know, and then moving forward, like, you know, once we started buying a house, you know, going through all that stuff, it's like, shit, like this is all stuff my dad was good at. I wish he was here to help me. But thankfully, you know, being 13, 14 years old, you know, using a table saw, using all this stuff, like fixing the house and working on the house was really nothing to me. It just would have been nice to have him see the progress, see how far I've come, see the end result. And that's something I'm working on now, you know, setting expectations of others. You know, that was something toxic I was doing, where I was putting that expectation on people that weren't involved. You know, I was like, why aren't you proud of me? Why aren't you showing this? It's like, it's not their thing. Like, shut up, like, move on. And then now, you know, getting ready to bring our daughter into the world, you know, the biggest thought is like, how am I going to explain all this to her once she's ready to learn? You know, do you tell her, you know, hey, my dad is, you know, he's up in heaven. What do I say about my mother? Do I just say, yeah, she croaked too? Like, or do I, you know, at what point do you be real with her? And I think a lot of people my age don't have to have that, you know, that dialogue of how do I cross this bridge? So that's what I'm working on currently, along with, you know, obviously not putting expectations of, you know, well, I wanted my dad to see this. Why aren't other people doing it? Those are the two things I'm working on right now. But
one question is, if your dad was here, what would you want him to say to you at this point in your life?
Ooh, that's a big one, because I haven't really thought of it. Probably just to say that he was proud of how much I've done and what I've accomplished. I would give everything on the face of the earth to hear that just one time.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I look for in other people. You know, be it your boss at work, you know, when you do a good job, you just want to hear it. You know, when you do something good, you want your parents to tell you, you know, you did a good job, you're doing okay. I don't have that. So I try to find it other ways through other people. And that just opens up a can of worms, because you're setting yourself up for failure. You're setting yourself up to never be able to hit that expectation, because they're living a normal life. You're not.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest thing is, you know, really reeling it back in and thinking, where is everybody else? Like, other people are drowning in their own shit. Like, they're not here to gas you up and fill the void that you might have. You know, people are having kids too. People have houses too. They're struggling. You know, whether they show it or not, they're not here to be that parental role.
Right. Or to fill you with those things you need.
Right.
a follow-up question to that is, when I hear you speak about that, it resonates pretty deeply with me for different reasons. And I'm just curious if you're able to receive love from other people, or if you have a hard time receiving that.
I think it's difficult because everything I dealt with my mom, it was always laced with like bad intentions, right? So she would always manipulate to get that love. You know, if I wasn't spending enough time with her, it was always, well, I'm going to take this away, or I'm going to treat you like shit. So when people do something nice to me or show affection, my first reaction is, what do you want from me? What do you need from me? Why are you being nice to me?
Yeah.
Right.
It's very challenging. I mean, even if, you know, Sarah says, hey, I love you, or, you know, you look nice today, it's like, what do you want? What do you need? You know, why are you being nice to me? What's the goal here? So yeah, it is very challenging. Even with friends, if they're being nice, it's like, okay, where's the but? You know, what do
Yeah.
you need? You know, something you need me to come look at this? You need me to fix this? Like, what are your real intentions here?
Yeah, that's like really hard to unlearn after you got so used to it.
Oh, it's almost impossible. You know, you literally have to pump the brakes and stop every single time someone's being nice. So meanwhile, they're like, "Oh my God, I love you." And they're just standing there, you know, staring at you. And you're going through like a 20-minute monologue in your head, like, okay, they said this. I think they mean this. This might be their intention. And then they think you're absolutely fucking crazy. But you're sitting here on 20 years of experience of just manipulation and just hurt, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that I have that, but I don't think it's the opposite side, but I have had to work very hard at accepting that I'm worthy of love. So for me, it's a worthiness thing. Like there are days even that I still struggle to believe that Ariana ever loved me, and if you knew our relationship, like everybody's just like, you're fucking stupid for even thinking that. But it's just like having that reinforced in my childhood and for various different things. To me, I'm like, if I'm not the best in the world at X, Y, or Z, why would you even love me? Because I have nothing to offer you. So,
Right.
like, as opposed to where you're saying like you're waiting for them to ask what they need, I'm like the other side where I'm just like, if I don't give you enough, if I'm not good enough, if I'm not the best, there's nothing in me that's worthy of love. And that's the thing that I've had to work through and kind of come to the terms with, that I am worthy of love, that I am love in itself.
Right. And I think I've also struggled with that. You know, obviously, I'm just going to put it very bluntly. Sarah was always very attractive, still is very attractive. I always see myself as this, you know, 250, 270-pound fat kid. Like, I don't see what she sees, you know? It's like, why are you with me? You know, her ex was like a millionaire trust fund baby, and I'm over here like, I fix cars, I make some money, you know, I can't afford shit. So it's like, why, you know? And I think I do struggle with that still, you know? It's one of those things like, my dad didn't love me enough to stay, and my mom didn't love me enough to not be, you know, a crazy manipulative monster.
Yeah. Wow.
So why do you love me?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, like, family will almost, air quotes, almost always be family. You know, you could probably be a dirtbag and your blood relatives will always be there, but someone coming in from the outside, like, you got to bring something to the table. Sometimes it's tough to understand, you know, exactly what that is.
Yeah, I think love is one of the trickiest things. I think we get weird signaling from society as well, where there's, on one hand, there's a lot of this, like, I'm going to find love in other people to validate me in an unhealthy way. And then I think there's this movement of a perception of being healthy where you're like, you have to love yourself first before anyone will love you. And I think that also is damaging, right? Because we are always on a path, if we're choosing that path, to growing and being better, right? Like you guys are going to therapy, you've been in therapy for 20 years, but like there's always these struggles and these battles that we have internally. And if we're getting signal of like, you have to love yourself for other people to love you, that can be just as damaging, because it's like, oh, I'm in a bad state right now. Does that mean I'm not worthy of love? Like that's fucked up.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a time not too long ago. When was it? It was like 2 years ago. My dog passed away. It was super, super tragic. It was horrible. But that sent me into probably like the second deepest, darkest depression I was ever in. And it took a long time to realize, like, A, I'm here, and B, like, this is fucked up. This is really bad. Apparently everybody saw it happening and nobody told me. And they were like, well, you wouldn't want to hear it anyway. But long story short, I figured it out, went back on medication, and I got better. But by the time I did that, she already put up all these walls to protect herself.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there like, hey, I'm better now, like that. But she's still, like, oh my God, he's a miserable piece of shit. Like, she went through hell. I was such a horrible person. Like, just miserable. Like, I don't want to do anything. I just want to go to bed. I want to drink myself to sleep, whatever. And she's still trying to live, her best life. Her career's growing. We're going through all this stuff. We got the house, we just lost our dog. She went through it, I would say, just as bad as I did, and I didn't even realize it. So, but, like I said, I went back on meds and within 2 weeks I was good, but she already had all these walls put up. And then, I was looking at her like, why are you so distant? Well, those were the walls she put up to protect herself. So then that became another hurdle. And then it's like, you start to think about the love again. And it's like, well, why do you love me if I'm just this wreck of a human being? The whole, you got to love yourself before others will love you. It's like, if you're in the deepest, darkest spot, how is anybody going to love you?
Right.
But she still did. She held on. She did what she had to do to protect herself. It's a wild ride. Mental health in its entirety is just uncharted waters. You never know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
And having a significant other that has to go through that, like, to this day, I still feel like a piece of shit for putting her through all that.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same moment, I'm like, you are such a beautiful, wonderful human being for sticking it out and, kind of always having that optimism, like, he's going to pull out of it. He will be better. And it's almost tough to accept the fact that, like, someone can see through everything you're going through and see you for who you really are and put themselves through that for you.
Yeah.
That took a lot. That took a lot. I felt like the biggest pile of human shit on the face of the earth for months.
That happened with Ariana. We had our first child, or she was on the way. And it was probably one of the darkest depressions that I was in. Because I have struggled with mental health for damn near my whole life. And I remember very distinctly, there was one night, it was around Christmas time. We were in the living room. The Christmas tree was backlight to me. And I was on the floor and my wife was on the couch. And I remember like having those feelings that you just expressed and looking at her and just being like, I'm broken. I'm completely broken. They're like, why even be here? Because there's no fixing me.
Why put yourself through this?
Right. And she jumped off the couch, grabbed me by my face and just stared me in the eyes. And she just kept saying, you're not broken. You're not broken. Mm-hmm. And then she walked me through what was some really difficult couple of years. And I always felt like being able to walk her through her cancer and ultimately into her death was like my way to repay everything that she did for me and everything that she walked through, and the misery that it was for her when I was in that deep depression. And I feel like I got to pay that back.
Well, that's awesome that you felt like you got to pay that back. That's
Yeah.
huge. I mean, I couldn't imagine. I feel like I would still never feel like I did enough.
Oh, dude, I feel like that every day. Like
Uh,
my mind just goes back to all the moments where I'm
yeah,
like, why the fuck did I do that? How could have I said that to her? Why didn't I do this or why didn't I that? Like it just haunts me.
yeah,
But when I'm at my best, yes, I do feel like I got to pay her back at least for her caring for me. And it was like this really full circle moment. But yeah, for sure.
that's really awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like for me the biggest haunting thought is obviously having a parent that committed suicide and dealing with mental health yourself. You know, there's always that looming, thing in the background like, ooh, are you next?
Mm,
So, having a wife, and having a house and all this stuff, it's like I can't do that. I can't do that to you. I can't do that to our child.
mm,
And I feel like it's just it's like the next milestone, it's always that possibility,
yeah.
and you just want it, you do everything in your power to avoid it. But at the end of the day, when you're in that depression, you're not thinking like that. You're not thinking, okay, this happened, I can't do this. I obviously do everything in my power. Like I've always said, like I will never, I cannot, it's just not in the cards. I'll do whatever it takes to avoid
Mm,
it. But at the end of the day, it's always still there. You
Yeah.
can't erase that. It will always be there until the day I die. And then, my kids, they're going to be like, well, grandpa did this, I can't do this. So, I mean, my whole family has it looming over their heads. And I remember being on a call with, it was both of us and our therapist, and she was beating me up about something. And I broke down. I'm like, I see 100% why my father did what he did. I feel like I look at my family and I look like everybody in my family. I am a spitting image of my grandfather. I smile like
mm,
my father. I act like my father. And it's like everything I do, the older I get, the more I become him. Like,
mm.
how do I avoid the end result?
Yeah.
And I forgot exactly what was said, but she literally just went silent for like 10 seconds. She goes, honey, you are not your father. You will never be
Mm,
your father. And for some reason that hit a nerve, and I had like a complete breakdown.
yeah.
And that was the point where I was like, okay, this is where we're turning everything around. Like, this is not going to happen. No way. Oh my God. I like got shivers. I thought I could like feel the phone call. It was wild. But, sometimes you got to get, broken down to build back up. And
You do.
that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to be a more optimistic, more open-minded person, try to look at both sides, all that stuff. It's wild because I've been a
Yeah.
miserable piss pot my whole life, I never had anything go right. So it's like, yeah, fuck
Right.
everything,
I mean,
you know?
literally. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always so interesting the way in which loss just, when it happens so young, just comes out in such different ways.
Hmm.
Like I, even in different phases of my life, have learned, like starting to date my boyfriend, like I learned new things about me. Like I'm like, oh shit, that stuff bothers me, or that stuff doesn't bother me. Or, sometimes he can be a miserable grump, and he's like, I don't know how you put up with me. And I'm like, well, sometimes I really don't either, but like, here we are. But, like it really is so interesting to me to hear how we all have adapted.
Mhm.
Obviously, I think, and we had to adapt to like what happened. Not every child loses their parent, between 9 and 13 or
Yeah.
any age.
Right.
We're like expected to like grow old and like bury them when they're 90. We're supposed to have them there for the wedding. We're supposed to have them there for buying our first house and having our first kid. So all those things that we have to go through and like do without them. And it's always so interesting to me. And I feel like every single day there's like a new thing that comes out that I'm like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
What do you do when you feel that? When you feel like, oh, this is new, how do you respond to that? How does your system respond?
It depends on what it is. Like if it's like a negative thing, or like I'm getting anxious about, like I haven't heard from like Nate in a while. Like there's the anxiety there is actually that like something happened to him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like you have to like talk yourself off that ledge. Like it'll be fine. He's fine. You know, he's doing XYZ or whatever. You know what I mean? And the same goes for like, you know, anyone in my family that I like love and like don't hear from or something like that. There's like that, what's wrong? Like, why haven't we heard from them? And I think I just have to, like, Phil, when you were talking about like when someone tells you that they love you and you're like, hang on a minute. Like you have like this whole monologue in your head. Like totally, you know, what are they? Okay. They're not, like everything's fine. They're just busy or whatever. You know what I mean? Like that's something that I definitely have to do like daily when these things crop up.
At least for me, I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but like just going day to day, right? Normal occurrences. At least for me, almost all of my reactions are like a trauma response. You know, okay, this has happened in the past. This is my reaction. It's like, I always look at other people. I'm like, are you living like a normal life, or are you fucked up like me? Where like every single like A leads to B, but I'm like A leads to X over here, you know, skip the T. It's like, is it nice having a normal life? Like, or am I just totally in the weeds?
Yeah. I don't know that there is such thing as a normal life. I think we just don't talk about it enough, so we perceive those things as normal.
Yes.
Now there's different experiences. Like I have a friend who doesn't have internal monologues. And I was like, wait,
oh my
what?
God, I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah. I'm like, how is that possible?
Not?
Right. Like, I'm like, I talk more to myself than anybody talks to me ever. Like I'm constantly like, even right now, like there's another thread that's observing me, observing you guys and saying like, say these things, don't say that. How are they reacting? What's he doing? What's she doing? Like there's always an internal monologue. Always.
Right.
Yeah. Same. That's like, there's that meme that's like, some people just literally walk around with no fucking thoughts in their head. And then there's me. Like, I'm like, there's always something. There's always something in my head.
Yeah. But that has its pros and cons too, right? Like there's always downfalls.
So I have a good question because my wife and I both have had this conversation numerous times. So a friend of ours is mid-20s, just lost her stepfather, right? Obviously having a horrible time with it, 100% understand. Everybody always brings up what would be easier, losing a child young and not having the memories, and living your whole life not having the memories, or the other way around. So becoming an adult, going through childhood, becoming an adult, and then losing them.
Yeah. Losing the parent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, like you think about it and your mind just wanders. It's like, holy shit. Like
we talked about that the other night, didn't we? A little bit.
We did. This comes up quite often, actually.
As someone, I feel like I am probably biased in saying this. Like, I don't know if someone that has lost their parent like at 30 would say differently. Although I feel like I want to do a little like a poll now, if that's appropriate, to poll people on what they would prefer.
That's like a dead parent joke poll. Like, we're going to ruffle feathers with this one. Like, prepare to be uncomfortable.
But I think it would be worse losing them like 25 to 30 than when I lost them. And then if I had 21 more years with my mom, I think that while I would look back and be like, all those memories are great, there was just like so many more years to grieve.
Right.
And like memories, like now I grieve like what she's missing.
But on the flip side, think about all the things you missed. It's all a matter of what did she miss versus what did you miss? Right. So for me, losing my dad young, I had to teach myself how to do everything. And it's like, wow, I wish my dad was here to teach me how to shave my face, how to, build a shed, all this stuff. And it's like, okay, YouTube is my dad now. Like, I learned how to do all this stuff, but I see both sides. And it's one of those things, like, you can't put a value on something like that.
It's the same thing in the widow community of like, if they die fast versus slow, right? Like, is it better that I had more time with my wife knowing she was going to die, or is it better if they die? And I think the conversation, it should, I don't want to say should, the conversation needs to move towards not better or worse or comparison, but how do we support the people who do have the fast death versus the slow death, and like what are the specific ways that's different, because the outcome is the same and a lot of the PTSD is the same in some sense, but it's like, how do we then help support those two different use cases? But I guess the question that I would ask both of you, because you both lost parents, so you could think about it in a way that I can't. I lost my dad at 34, but I didn't grow up with him necessarily. So I would ask you, would you rather lose would you rather lose Nate? Would you rather lose Sarah after a year of being with them, or rather 20 years being with them? Like, you can put it in that perspective to see how you would feel about it. Right.
You're right.
You know, that's one way to think about that.
I don't know. That's tough. I almost want to say 1 year, because you don't have those memories, those bonds, those connections.
Yeah.
But at the same side of the coin, you're sacrificing the what could have been.
Correct.
Yeah. I think this is why it'd be very interesting to get everyone's take on it, because, the people that did have those memories or like those experiences, those 30 years, I think they might say, I almost wish it happened earlier, because it's so painful looking back on all those memories, and it is still painful for them because they still have big moments to go through.
Right.
Our big moments, like graduating high school and getting married, we had those big moments, but everyone has big moments in their life. Maybe there's a little bit less after 30, but
it's all downhill after that.
Yeah.
Come on now, man. I'm 38. Like, fuck. It is kind of downhill after that.
Yeah, it's done, man.
I'm living my best life. You kidding me? My wife's dead. I'm a single dad. It doesn't get any better than this. Get to do a podcast where all we talk about is death.
There are people in the future cringing over that, and we're all over here like.
Yeah, but to your point, CJ, I think that the point is that it all fucking sucks as we go back to, and it's just a different experience, or your grief process might look a little bit differently, because you had those 30 years, or because you only had 9 years, and it will change. It changes you as a person no matter what. Any death, not any death, but death and loss changes you, and what someone might perceive as significant is different than what I might like. My dog dying is literally like my second biggest fear.
It sucks, dude. It fucking sucks. Oh my god.
I know. In December we had to put one of our dogs down, and we like still cry about it, honestly. But yeah, so I think it's just all about it's there's neither is worse. Well, they're both shit. They're both shit. And
it's all shit.
It's all shit, but we're getting through it one day at a time.
And we're talking about it, right?
Like,
the more we talk about it, the better equipped I think people could be in the future. And I'm so intensely interested in learning the differences between these, because I think the more we expose the different experiences, what's different versus what's similar, somebody's going to pick that up and build like ways to help people in very specific ways. And I think that would be the most beautiful thing ever, is if we can just start treating grief as this long-term thing and learning how to help people through it, and educating those who just haven't hit it yet, because they will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whenever I experience a frustrating person, I'm like,
what have you seen? What have you done? Why are you the way you are?
Yeah, like because like no one wants to be, I mean, I don't think some people might be, but I don't think anyone wants to be miserable or wants to like just, I don't know, we always want to we have good intentions.
Right.
Some people don't, obviously. But I always try to I think we talk a lot about like giving people grace as well. And I think that's another thing where it just and that's why all these conversations are just so amazing because, everyone is impacted by death so differently. And some are, there's some similarities, right? Like, Phil, you and I both have had this feeling of like having to grow up so quickly, and maturing so fast, and for obviously your maturation looks so much different than mine. But it is there's still probably similarities in the ways in which we approach things or do things or the way that people see us,
right.
Because we just at 9 years old, we're thrusted into adulthood, basically. And not everyone had that experience. They didn't have to become an adult until they were 35.
Yeah. If there's one last thing that you would want to leave with people, what would be that thing?
I think just, one day at a time. Never hold yourself to a standard. Everything is different. Every day is going to be different. Every situation is going to be different. Always give yourself that slack. And also never take life too seriously. Go have fun, do dumb shit. Nobody makes it out alive. You can always live your life and try and be the best, perfect, pillar of perfection. But at the end of the day, we all end up in the same spot. Enjoy it.
Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree with that.
And also dead dad jokes are fucking sick, man. They're great. Let them fly.
The world needs more of them.
All right. Lightning round.
All
right. How many kids do you want?
Oh, so having a daughter, I want a son, but we had psychics tell us that we were going to have twins. So now we're afraid of having 3 kids.
Whoa.
So 1.5 to 2. Those are dangerous waters.
Yeah.
3 kids is a lot. I'll tell you that.
I'm very scared of that.
Yeah, it's a lot. What is your favorite drink? Alcoholic beverage.
Ooh,
I
bourbon.
see you're drinking scotch right now.
I'm drinking bourbon right now.
Okay.
Do you have a name picked out?
Yes.
That you are sharing?
It is going to be Sophia Juliana.
Oh, I love that. What a great name. Love it.
Okay, so I'm going to alter this one to make it fit for you. If you could ask your dad one thing, what would it be?
Ooh. Are you proud of who I've become?
What's your favorite car? Because you're a mechanic, is that right?
Yeah. So it depends on the category. So my all-time favorite would be an old AC Cobra. But on the more modern side, it would be the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Phil. We appreciate you being here, opening up and sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Day After. You can find this podcast and more at our website at www.thedayafter.com. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you take a moment to leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcast.